A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with Eric Delbert from LEPD Firearms and Range in Columbus, Ohio, here in just a couple of minutes. Eric, and the folks at LEPD Firearms and Range, they have a weekend radio show, and they had a very, very interesting guest this past Saturday. The author of the bill to ban, quote-unquote, mass casualty firearms in the state of Ohio. And it was an eye-opening and enlightening interview. We'll talk about it with Eric Delbert here in just a second. Before we do that, though, let's talk about this for a moment. At the very heart of our democracy lies the principle that we hold sacred: free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech, committed to giving a voice to the silenced. Wealth Protection Research does tirelessly seek out financial experts, the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas that mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it completely free. Just text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, then act now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. All right, let's get to our conversation with Eric Delbert about this interview last weekend with the author of a bill to ban, quote-unquote, mass casualty firearms in Ohio. A bill, by the way, that defines a mass casualty firearm is basically any firearm that either has a fixed magazine of, I believe it's 32 rounds or more, or a semi-automatic firearm that can be modified or is designed to shoot more than 30 rounds without reloading. That would apparently include every semi-automatic firearm that is capable of accepting a detachable magazine. So, yeah, a sweeping semi-auto ban. Although, should be noted, the author of this bill apparently doesn't see it that way. Take a look and a listen. Eric, thanks so much for coming on the program today. It's good to see you again, sir.
Always good to be here.
And congratulations on the scoop, by the way. This is actually really great. So a few weeks ago, there was a representative in Ohio, Willis Blackshear, I believe, who introduced a bill, House Bill 433, which prohibits a person from knowingly acquiring, having, carrying, or using any mass casualty weapon, which in the bill is defined as, quote, any semi-automatic firearm designed or specifically adapted to fire more than 31 cartridges without reloading, other than a firearm chambered in only 22 caliber short, long, or long rifle cartridges. So, Eric, that sounds like a really big gun ban, right? I mean, that sounds like you're banning basically any semi-automatic firearm that is capable of accepting a detachable magazine, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we estimated it would ban 85% of the firearms we sell in the store. We sell, we have 1,000 firearms in inventory at any given time. We went through probably about 85% of those would have been affected by such a ban.
So you reached out to Representative Blackshear and invited him on your radio show.
We did. We always do. I mean, we have always tried to reach out to these politicians or somebody who's not necessarily a friend of the gun community to kind of extend an olive branch, but to also 9 times out of 10, they say no. And then so we go on our radio show and say, hey, look, we reached out to them and they didn't respond or, refused to come on. And surprisingly, we got a pretty immediate response about a month ago saying he would like to be on the show.
Wow. All right. And, listen, credit for him for going on the show with you this past weekend. Now, I listened to the interview, and I have to say you did a great job with this, Eric. But I am still confused because in listening to Representative Blackshear talk, it sounded like he was describing it. It almost sounded like he was describing a magazine ban, but we know that that's not the case because a mass casualty weapon is defined as a firearm. That blah 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 blah. Right? But he kept you brought up the fact that 85% of the guns in your store would be banned, and he seemed to think he seemed to be surprised by that.
Yeah, and we knew that his knowledge on firearms had to be little to none because we had done an interview with a local TV station immediately after this bill came out. He was opposite us in the interview, and when the reporter asked him, "Hey, some of the firearms enthusiasts are concerned that this is going to ban firearms," right then he says, "No, no, no. This only bans firearms once a magazine is inserted in it." And I told the reporter, "Well, that's not how it reads. I'm not sure what he thinks the bill is or what the intent of the bill is, but that is certainly not what it reads." And that was our intent during the interview on Saturday. I wanted to ask him, I wanted to get his knowledge base. And then I wanted to put out there, hey, look, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but you just banned all these firearms. And you see what his response was, oh, no, it only bans the ones who can be modified to take a higher capacity magazine. And I said, with all due respect, sir, they all can take it. There's no modification. And he was under the impression that there had to be some big modification to be able to accept him.
Yeah, and the bill itself says specifically designed or modified, right? So if you're designing a firearm to accept detachable magazines, then again, that would be covered. There's no modification necessary. I also thought it was interesting that he acknowledged this bill probably isn't going anywhere, right? You've got a Republican supermajority in both the House and the Senate, so I think it's fair to say it's not going anywhere. I think it's scheduled for a committee hearing, but even he said, this probably isn't going to get enacted into law. So what was the rationale for introducing the bill?
I feel for him, and I try not to be judgmental. I mean, his region that he covers is Dayton. They had a horrible shooting there a number of years ago. He is probably hearing that when he goes around talking to his constituents, and he's a newly elected politician in there. I'm sure he wants to be able to say, look, I'm trying to make inroads, trying to prevent this in the future. The thing, though, Cam, that is frustrating time and time again is these individuals seem to not even know what they don't know. I mean, if I was going into a topic that I had nothing about, the first thing I'm going to do is surround myself by people who know what they're talking about. It just doesn't seem to be the case. I would gladly take a call from him and help with legislation, just like I said in the interview. I mean, how impactful would that be for us to stand side by side with him at the State House on something that had a meaningful effect on the street while preserving our rights. But they never reach out.
And listen, to be fair, Eric, your solutions to reducing violent crime are probably very different than Representative Blackshear's solutions, right? Before we started this interview, you were just talking about a homicide that took place in Columbus, where the suspect had been arrested multiple times before, right? Sounds like for domestic violence incident, sounds like this was a domestic incident.
Yeah.
And yet, despite that litany of arrests and charges that have been filed against him, he was still out on the street able to commit this particular crime, allegedly.
Wow, it plays out, Cam, time and time again, not just in Columbus, but other, unfortunately, Democrat-run cities where it has now gotten to the judge level, and we see it. My fellow officers, I talk to them, and they're so frustrated. We put these guys behind bars, and they're immediately out. The juveniles is horrible. I mean, I've had friends who've arrested the same set of juveniles twice in a shift in stolen cars. That is not something that we should be proud of, and that is something that I think continues to go on. Now, I will say, we're starting to see a little change here, just because the general public is standing up and saying, guys, enough is enough. We can't even feel safe going out. I mean, without worrying about your car being stolen or broken into.
Yeah. And, juvenile crime, I mean, this is something that we've kind of touched on at Bearing Arms in particular, because, we've talked with Dr. John Lott about this. I don't know how much you can trust the official statistics, because, again, sometimes don't get reported, things of that nature. But even if the number of crimes are going down, which appears to be the case. And certainly that seems to be the case when we're talking about homicide. The types of crimes that we're seeing juveniles commit appears to be really brazen, right? And it's not just property crimes like stealing a car. The fact that, you can arrest an individual twice in one shift is just gobsmacking to me. But again, crimes involving weapons, right? Where we're seeing, just a couple of weeks ago, I think I saw it was like 12-year-old that stole a car. I think it was stole a flatbed truck, rammed into the side of a gun store, and then ended up stealing more than a dozen firearms. This person's not even old enough to drive legally, but he stole a car and then used it to do a smash and grab at a gun store. And because of their age, the court system is likely to give them a slap on the wrist, maybe a couple of years of supervision, and then they're on their own, right?
It's just crazy. And it's it used to be, like, especially the areas where I patrol and up in kind of where our store is located, it is a nice area, and it still is. If we had 3 years ago, if you heard of a shooting of any sort up here, people were talking about it for a week. It is a daily occurrence. It is daily now, where something around the corner, or somebody drove by and fired shots. It's daily in these suburbs now, where it never touched it. And that's when it's going to take people standing up saying enough is enough. I just don't know. I don't know in these big cities like in Franklin County, where Columbus is. I don't know if it comes back. I mean, we are so far gone in so much of the procedurals and the judicial system here. I'm not sure it comes back.
And the Democrats would say, well, it's because of constitutional carry, right? It's because of Ohio's weak gun laws. But, when you talk about the other side of, you can put a law on the books, but then you got to enforce it, right? So there was just a case in Maine over the weekend, a guy, again, already on probation. I believe his girlfriend had taken out a domestic violence restraining order, an order of protection. Actually, charges were filed, now that I think about it. And he was held on a probation violation without bail for about 2 weeks. He was convicted of serious crimes back in 2011. Eventually, though, a judge says, yeah, you know what, $1,500 bond, you can get out. I think there was he raised a Sixth Amendment issue. So maybe there was an issue with him not being able to find a defense attorney. There wasn't a public defender available. So the guy gets out, and then over the weekend goes off on this crime spree, starts burning down homes. Officers were finally forced to shoot and kill him. But now they're blaming the courts for this guy being out on the street. The nuts and bolts of the judicial system. I know it's not sexy to talk about. Politicians don't really want to talk about it, but I'm curious, are you seeing this in Columbus where, just delays are happening, or cases are even being dismissed because the system isn't functioning the way that it should?
Cam, it's all the time. It's all the time. The sliver of hope, though, is there are still amazing law enforcement officers out there. There's still very good prosecutors that are in these offices who, when you can get a hold of, they will still go to town and do whatever it takes to keep the bad guys behind bars. We had a great example here right at our store to show that we can still make a difference. We had a gentleman 2 months ago come in with his girlfriend. They both attempted to buy a firearm. So in that case, our guard is down on a straw purchase scenario because they're both buying them. On the 4473, they both have the same address, so they live under the same roof. She gets immediate proceed that day, he gets a delay. And as you know, that's not uncommon. 2 days later, it comes back and he gets denied. So that is a cause of concern. Most gun stores would take that paperwork, file it away, it's a deny, and go about their business. We looked at it and determined this guy is a bad guy. Priors for attempted murder, multiple priors for firing into a structure. He is somebody that collectively we can all agree shouldn't be around firearms, right? So we get a hold of his probation officer in Franklin County. We get a hold of the bailiff in Franklin County, and they all say, thanks for the information, and don't even take our name and number. So we continued to push until we got it to the right prosecutor, and come to find out, thanks to our governor and AG here in Ohio, a couple years back, we had a law passed in Ohio where local departments can now charge these individuals for lying on the federal form. And so we were able to charge him for providing false information because he put down he wasn't a felon on the form in the course of trying to buy a gun. He handled several firearms in our store. We got 4 indictments last week on this individual for felonies at the local level. and we didn't even have to worry about getting to the federal side and going through all of that. So there is hope. I mean, there is, if we continue to push, I think we can still, turn this around, but it's going to take a fight.
Do you think you're able to turn Representative Blackshear around at all over the course of your conversation? Do you think you're able to get him to see some of the problems that are inherent in this bill?
I think so. I immediately sent him an email afterwards saying, "Sir, we want to talk. We want to be a part of the solution with you. Give me a call. Let's talk about it." I haven't heard back from him yet, but it's early on a Monday. And so, I do. I hope, if he is a sensible person, and truly wants to make change and for his constituents in his area, and he is adamant about this, then hopefully he'll reach out. I mean, we'd love to enlighten him and tell him, where there's things that can be done. There's certainly things that can be done to affect change that aren't being done.
How concerned are you that this bill, or at least another version of this bill, is going to pop up in other states? One of the things that we see all the time is that the gun control groups draft this legislation. They give it to a lawmaker, say, "Hey, run with this." A lawmaker loves it. The reason why I ask is because when this bill was first introduced, there was immediately praise from Moms Demand Action, which makes you wonder if every town had a hand at all in writing this legislation. And if so, I mean, look, they operate in all 50 states, right? So this bad idea might not just stay confined to Ohio.
Yeah, it's always a concern. And, we've even reached out. I've spoken at a Moms Demand Action meeting. They're trying to extend, again, an olive branch, saying, "Guys, okay, I know that you're passionate about keeping guns off the streets and out of the hands of the bad guys. Guess what? I am too. So let's see what we can do." But in that meeting that I had with them a few years ago, they weren't genuine. They weren't genuine, and things that went on during the meeting immediately after were shocking to the sense. So I don't know. I don't know if it ever stops, but we'll continue to try to reach out and make change happen. That will be, something that we can all look outside and say, yeah, it definitely has helped out there on the streets.
Yeah. Well, again, kudos for reaching out to Representative Blackshear, and credit to him for coming on the show. I can't say that I'm any more in favor of his legislation after listening to the interview. But again, I thought you did a great job of trying to talk him through the problems that are inherent in that bill, not only from for gun owners, but just from a constitutional perspective, the fundamental flaws in that bill. Eric, thank you for everything you do, man. If folks want to check out the interview, how do they do it?
Yeah, 2 different ways, or actually 3 different ways. It's out there on our YouTube channel, LEPD Firearms and Range. It's out there on our Facebook page, the same. And then really any of the place you get podcasts, iTunes, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. We're out there everywhere, and it's just On Target radio show. And the interview was last Saturday.
Awesome. Eric Delbert, thank you so much for joining me on the program today, man. Look forward to doing this again very soon.
Absolutely. We look forward to coming back.
My thanks again to Eric for joining me on the program. And by the way, kudos to Eric, not only for getting Representative Willis Blackshear on the show, but for avoiding the question that I would have asked at some point. And that is, what you talking about, Willis? Eric Delbert did not go down the different strokes route. He is maybe more professional than I am in that regard. But I do wonder what Representative Willis Blackshear is, in fact, talking about with this bill to ban mass casualty firearms, because clearly either he was really shocked at the scope of this bill that he wrote, or he's really good at feigning surprise, because he did seem taken aback when Eric Delbert talked about the vast majority of the guns that are sold in his shop would be considered mass casualty firearms. When you're talking about essentially banning every semi-automatic firearm that's chambered in something other than 22, so long as it can accept a detachable magazine, yeah, that is essentially a semi-auto ban, not a quote-unquote mass casualty ban. That is, let's ban as many firearms as we can ban. And I don't think it's going anywhere in Ohio, but if something like this gets introduced in California or New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Hawaii, Maryland, yeah, it could be a different story. All right. Before we get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, let's talk about this for just 1 second. Economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. With inflation on the rise, global uncertainty looming, it is clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't had your eye on gold, time to make it a priority. Priority gold. Trust their team of proven professionals to help you diversify your savings with gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD or visit prioritygold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, you can see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree that physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings no matter the economic climate. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist or visit prioritygold.com/golden to learn more. That's 1-800-405-GOLD. All right, turning now to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. Let's actually start there. I mentioned this story in our conversation with Eric Delbert. Here's the headline. Maine law enforcement blamed judge for release of Auburn suspect. And again, this was a frightening incident in Auburn, Maine over the weekend where police ended up killing this armed man who was released. 43-year-old Leon Hinckley, allegedly trying to break into a woman's home early Saturday morning. The woman, Hinckley's ex-girlfriend. While they were searching for Hinckley, 2 homes caught on fire before 2 members of the Maine State Police tactical team shot and killed Hinckley on a nearby rooftop. Investigators found one person dead inside one of the homes that burned down. Hinckley, as it turns out, had been released from jail last Wednesday after paying some $1,500 bail 2 weeks after he was arrested for domestic violence. He was convicted of domestic violence and assault in 2011, specifically elevated aggravated assault. That was back in 2011. Again, we have the more recent domestic violence arrest. And yet again, he was, after a couple of weeks, given $1,500 probation and was set free by a judge. WGME in Maine says in her decision, the judge, Sarah Churchill, reportedly cited the Sixth Amendment and said that because Hinckley could not get a defense attorney, he was released. The Maine Fraternal Order of Police said in a statement, in hindsight, we can determine that the Androscoggin DA's office did its job. They knew that Hinckley had a high likelihood of recidivism. They knew that they had an obligation to protect the victim in this domestic violence incident. They did their job arguing in court to keep Hinckley incarcerated. Further, Hinckley's former girlfriend also stepped forward and looked to the court for help and obtained a protection from abuse order. The responsibility now squarely falls on Judge Sarah Churchill. Despite the severity of Hinckley's prior criminal charges, a victim seeking help from the court and opposition from prosecutors, Judge Churchill essentially let him off the hook. After 2 weeks of incarceration on new criminal charges and violating his probation, Judge Churchill cited Hinckley's Sixth Amendment right based on a failure to obtain legal counsel as the reason for his release. This poor judgment shows a blatant disregard for the safety of a victim of domestic violence and public safety. If Leon Hinckley had remained incarcerated as he should have been, the events of June 15th would not have taken place. Judge Churchill's poor judgment led to the loss of life and property and put the public and responding police officers in the line of fire from a man who should have remained locked up. This tragedy should never have occurred. We demand better judgment in our courts and accountability for Judge Sarah Churchill's incompetent actions. Now, calling a judge out like that by name specifically is rare, I think it's safe to say. But in this case, I don't know that it's unwarranted. Look, I'm a big believer in all of our rights, including our Sixth Amendment right to counsel. And the problem is that this most recent charge was only 2 weeks old. So, yes, on the one hand, you can't keep somebody behind bars without formal charges forever and ever, right? But he had been formally charged. You can't keep somebody behind bars without counsel forever and ever. But it had only been 2 weeks. I know that his first court date was probably coming up. Needed to have counsel present. Otherwise, that hearing would have had to be delayed. Probably could have gotten away with one delay. I mean, we've had cases where people have been in jail for over a year before their case has been dismissed because they have not been provided a defense attorney and one has not been appointed to them. So 2 weeks is an awfully short timeline. But this does indicate, again, a legitimate problem here. And that is while the courts are returning to the semi-functional state that they were in before COVID. We're not seeing, closures. We're not seeing cases just having to be dismissed willy-nilly. There is still a problem in a lot of jurisdictions with a lack, not of prosecutors necessarily, but a lack of public defenders. And those are an important part of the criminal justice system. If you don't have enough public defenders, then incidents like this are going to become more common. So we need to ensure that after an arrest has been made, that these individuals do have access to a defense attorney so that we don't see incidents like this pop up. Now, again, in this case, I think after just 2 weeks, I think it was a little early to start citing the Sixth Amendment. But it is a genuine concern. And again, a lack of public defenders can lead to more individuals like Lee and Hinckley being released when they should be behind bars. All right, on to today's armed citizen story from Phoenix, Arizona, where police say a man was shot and killed in self-defense after an argument over a parking space. Again, this is just one of those incidents where you see this story and you think to yourself, why would somebody escalate things to the point of violence over a parking space? This was Saturday night, just before 9:30. Phoenix police called out to a shooting near the Twin Peaks restaurant. When officers arrived, they detained a man who had a gun. Another man, identified as 32-year-old Alejandro Semplina, found on the ground in the parking lot. He was taken to a hospital where he later passed away. According to police, Semplina and the shooter got into an argument over parking. That's when Semplina pulled out a knife and ended up chasing the man around a car. And that's when the man grabbed a gun from the open door of his vehicle. Police say that even after the man had armed himself, Semplina continued to approach the man with a knife in a, quote, threatening manner, which is when the man fired his gun, hitting Semplina. Detectives interviewed the victim in this case, who claimed self-defense. Police said that the claim was consistent with both witness testimony and surveillance video. He was released after speaking to officers there at the scene. They say charges will be submitted to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for further review. But in this case, again, everything appears to be a pretty clear-cut case of self-defense, but just a waste. Let's say this guy cut in front of Alejandro Semplina, took the space that Semplina was really hoping to pull into. All right, so you know what? You mutter under your breath, that dirty, rotten so-and-so, maybe shake your fist, and then you drive down the aisle of the parking lot until you find another space. You pull in, you park, you get out, you shake it off, and you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. That didn't happen. Instead, Alejandro Semplina took what may have been just a bad moment and escalated it to the point of physical violence, to the point where this individual's life was threatened, and he was forced to use a firearm in self-defense. I am glad that the surveillance video, the eyewitness testimony, match up with this man's account, and it doesn't sound like any charges will be filed, but I cannot understand what would go through the mind of somebody like Semplina to escalate things to this level over something that is a non-issue. You let it go, and 2 minutes later, it's out of your mind. Unfortunately, not everybody has the wherewithal to do that. And a minor slight can turn into a threat against our lives at any given moment, which is why we should always be carrying a firearm for self-defense. All right, finally, today's good deed of the day. In the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A couple of individuals in western PA who helped to save a delivery driver who collapsed on the job. Boy, you talk about being in the right place at the right time. This was Thursday afternoon in Bridgeville, Pennsylvania. Mark McCullough says he was talking to his local FedEx driver when the worker suddenly collapsed. He said, I stepped outside after he put down a second box, and I asked him, hey, how many more boxes you got? And at that point, he started to answer, and then he just collapsed. So McCullough immediately calls 911, and then he noticed the man had stopped breathing. That's when McCullough's neighbor, State Senator Devlin Robinson, a Republican from Bridgeville, ran over to help. Robinson said, originally I thought he was having a seizure, so I wanted to flip him over and then clear his airway. But then they realized, okay, no, he's not breathing at all. So dispatchers actually walked McCullough and Robinson through chest compressions. And before paramedics even arrived, they were able to get this man breathing again. Robinson said, the package wasn't even supposed to be delivered that day. Mark wasn't supposed to be home. And I wasn't supposed to be stopping at home either. He said, so there's something in play. It just wasn't his time. At last report, the FedEx driver in the ICU, but his condition has improved. FedEx released a statement to Channel 11 in Pittsburgh saying our thoughts are with the team member as he recovers from the incident. We offer our gratitude to Mr. McCullough and Senator Robinson for their quick action and coming to our team members' aid. Well, hopefully the driver continues to recover, but again, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing on a day when neither of these two individuals were even supposed to be at home. Mark McCullough and, State Senator Robinson, Devlin Robinson, we thank you for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. I am looking forward to being back with you again tomorrow. By the way, we talked about this at bearingarms.com. No real news from the Supreme Court today in its Monday's orders. It did deny Gazzola versus Hochul, which is a challenge, a sort of preemptive challenge to some of the post-Bruin gun laws. But no action taken on the Illinois gun ban cases. I was a little surprised to see that. I was kind of hoping that last week's decision striking down the bump stock ban meant that maybe the Supreme Court was ready to say something about these Illinois cases, given that the Supreme Court just said putting a bump stock on a semi-automatic firearm doesn't make it a machine gun. That would seem to undercut the Seventh Circuit's argument that AR-15s are like machine guns even without a bump stock attached. But the court didn't say anything about those Illinois cases. They didn't turn them away. They didn't grant cert. They didn't give any orders. So we will wait and see what the Supreme Court is doing in those Illinois cases. I am officially surprised and curious, and I don't know what's going on. They seem to be keeping them around for some reason. So maybe the court will say something in its upcoming Rahimi decision that will have an impact on the Illinois cases. We'll just we'll have to wait and see. The court's operating on court time, and then really let us know what all of the behind-the-scenes machinations are. So we will continue paying attention to what's going on at the Supreme Court, state houses, courthouses around the country, and, of course, in the culture wars as well. You can find out all the latest 2A information at bearingarms.com. And if you like what you see, I would encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. Just use the promo code SAVEAMERICA, and you can get 50% off your VIP or VIP Gold membership. You'll get exclusive content, an ad-free experience, the ability to comment on stories, but you'll also be helping us get the word out in a day and age of big tech censorship and anti-gun media bias, and we certainly do appreciate your support. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, as well as a back-to-work Monday can be enjoyed. We'll see you back here tomorrow for 2A Tuesday. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.